Well, a big welcome to everybody, and just I'll let you know that my name's Trevor Hazel. I now live in Orange. I've been living here for 5 years now. I work for the Centre for Rural and Remote Mental Health, which is part of the University of Newcastle. Our centre's been here for 18 years or more now, and it's still many people in Orange aren't familiar with us. However, we've been working on the improvement of the mental health and well-being of people in rural areas since 2000. And we're very privileged to be partnering with WayAhead, an organisation based in Sydney but relevant to the whole of New South Wales, to host this event tonight. I would start by acknowledging and paying our respects to the Wiradjuri people, the traditional owners and custodians of this wonderful land on which Orange Public School is located and in which we are gathered. In light of Orange's history as the location of one of the large regional mental institutions for people with severe mental illness, I'd also like to acknowledge the experience of people who live their lives and work hard every day to recover and to do well, even though they experience a mental illness, and also to those family members, good friends and neighbours who support them along the way and give them hope. We're committed to guiding rural New South Wales towards full recognition of the rights of people who live with mental illness, and away from the darkness of stigma and discrimination. I particularly would like to acknowledge those who have had an experience of suicidal thinking, people in their lives who have attempted suicide or died by suicide. That's a tough journey to go down for any of us. But let's say that we're very proud of our rural areas in New South Wales, but one thing that we have to worry about is the fact that suicide is more prevalent in rural New South Wales than it is in the capital city. And if there's ever a good reason for a community to meet together to discuss something, it's to get together to talk about suicide. And so that's what we'll be doing tonight, the beginning of a conversation about suicide. Before I go on to explain what we're going to do in the next hour, I'd like to invite our well-known Mayor, Councillor Reg Kidd, to just welcome us to this place and for this meeting.
Thank you, distinguished guests, and I can't see Phil Donato, our local member. Thank you very much. Look, it does give me a great deal of pleasure to be able to say a few words tonight for a number of reasons, because going right back to seeing the Centre for Rural and Remote Health set up here in Orange, I've been very, very involved with rural health and farm safety. I can also say that I've been very, very close to the bone, if you wish, with suicide when I've lost a friend and a couple of very, very close colleagues that I work with in the farming area. And I've been associated with Are You OK, Beyond Blue, and a few others in raising funds, but particularly awareness. But then I spoke last year to say that it was easy raising funds and talking about it, but then actually becoming aware yourself that you had a problem later in life like I did. So it was with a great deal of pleasure last year I was down launching the Glove Box Guide to mental health. But I think this series of talks does mean a lot to me because it's, can I just say to you, in rural areas in particular, and I'm only talking about farming areas, I know that the statistics are wrong. The amount of accidents are put down to hitting a tree on the one tree plain down near Hay, the accidents on railway crossings where they know there's only one train or two trains a day that go through there, or running into a gully that they transverse all the time normally on a motorbike or on a horse or in a utility, and it's pretty obvious that they've run into that ditch at a fairly high speed and flipped the utility I think all those statistics are still to come forward. So I think greater recognition by all of us, having governments, both state and federal, and through the various bureaucracies, having mechanisms in place where we can educate everybody out there, because somewhere along the line there won't be a family that won't have a close associate or a family member struggle with either contemplating suicide or perhaps suiciding, which is an absolutely tragedy in itself. So congratulations to you all in putting this together. I look forward to reading all the papers. I also look forward to reading a paper that was just mentioned about some work overseas, and I'm off to the States early next month for a son's wedding. But in fact, I have a very, very good friend that works over in the area of mental health, if you like, mental health, over there, but mainly in rural areas. And an issue that they're looking at in the farming states in the United States, Wyoming, Montana, Utah, and through that farming belt, is the same thing. High incidences of suicide, or they think they're suicide, but they put them down to a car accident, a train accident. You know, if someone's been, can I just leave you this one? Someone that's been fumigating silos all their life know the hazards. And a quick and pleasant death is being in a silo by yourself and fumigating. It's quicker than carbon monoxide, and the rates of fumigation deaths have gone up in the United States in the grain belt. And I suspect if we looked at the ones in Australia, how many of those are in fact when a person's by themselves, and against the law you're supposed to have two people there working in the silo. So best of luck this evening. I look forward to seeing what the outcomes are, but just say to you, it's very much about a journey. We won't get the solution overnight, but if we can make a difference on that journey, that's the important things. So thank you, and welcome to Orange.
They're mine, I think. That one's mine.
You didn't give up.
Oh, no, that one's yours, okay. Gee whiz, make it hard. Look, I'd just like to acknowledge there are a few acknowledgements to make. First of all, welcome to Phil Donato, our Honourable Phil Donato, our local member. And we will be joined later in the meeting by Andrew G., our federal member, which is terrific to have those two gentlemen with us to hear our discussions and to hear, I hope, our commitment to an ongoing prevention of suicide. I would also like to welcome from Sydney the CEO of WayAhead, Liz Priestley, who's sitting in the front here. Liz will talk to you a little bit about the organisation WayAhead, and their comms team manager, Ben Graham, who's sitting up the front here. We also have the Director of Mental Health and Drug and Alcohol Service for Western Local Health District, Jason Crisp, and Deputy Principal of Anson Street School, Jodie Pritchard. So I welcome all of those guests to this meeting. Tonight we're going to hear from the Director of the Centre for Rural and Remote Mental Health, Professor David Perkins, and from Liz Priestley. We're also going to hear from two of the teachers from here in Orange Public School about some of the positive programs that they've put in place to build the well-being and resilience of students at a very young age, which I think is a really important commitment to the future and the future generation of people who choose life against the option of suicide. And also, very well known to many of you is Di Gill, who's our Rural Adversity Mental Health Program coordinator for this part of Western Local Health District. Many of you will already know Di and know that she's a brilliant speaker. Now, I've been asked to just a couple of housekeeping things. One is, directly opposite the back door and across the courtyard, there's a green door with a white label on it. It's a disabled toilet. That's the toilet that's open for us to use tonight. I don't really understand the next thing I'm going to say, but if any of you would like to tweet about this meeting, then the hashtag is on the board there. Have I said that correctly? Any social media platform. The next thing is that in your folders there's going to be a piece of paper. We're going to have some speakers, and then we're going to have a half an hour where you can ask questions. We're going to have like a Q&A, and if you'd like to write your question down during the first half of the meeting, we'll collect those, and then the panel will try as best as possible to answer those. If you feel comfortable asking a question from the floor, that's okay as well. But just in case you might prefer to write your question down, we'll collect those just before the panel speaks. There is also an evaluation sheet, and that's in your folder. And before you leave tonight, if you could it's a very brief evaluation sheet, really, really easy to fill in. So if you could mind filling that in, and Ben Graham will collect that at the end of the meeting. So I'd just like to open the formal proceedings for the night by introducing to you a friend of mine who I've known for a long time, since I first started getting involved in the prevention of mental illness and suicide back in the 1990s, Liz Priestley, and welcome to Orange, Liz. Oh, I'm sorry. They'll never ask me to do this again. I did say...
I don't mind being in front of David.
What could go wrong?
Thanks, Trevor. Thank you. Firstly, can I just say good evening to all of you coming out tonight. I'm from Sydney, obviously, and it doesn't get quite as cold here. So the few opportunities I get to go in the country where it's cold, I'm just full of admiration for people that leave the warmth of their house to come out, particularly of a weeknight. I think that's quite amazing. Can I also just acknowledge and respect the Wiradjuri people, the traditional custodians of the land that we're on. As Trevor said, my name is Elizabeth Priestley. I'm CEO of WayAhead Mental Health Association, previously Mental Health Association, previously Association for Mental Health, and prior to that, believe it or not, a little while back, but the Council for Mental Hygiene. Amazing name, isn't it? The WayAhead Mental Health Association it was first formed in 1932. We were one of the oldest charities, mental health charities. And interesting enough, we were established by a group of psychiatrists who came together concerned about mental health issues. And we're very fortunate to have a lot of really good documents, minutes of the first meeting that was held, and various press clippings and things that were available on the day. And they had a few issues that they were concerned about, but the two main concerns way back in April 1932 was youth suicide and the mental health of refugees coming to Australia. So while an awful lot changes, there's an awful lot that doesn't change, that we all seem to be going over the same grounds. I personally believe that I've been working in mental health now for quite a while. I sort of fell into it and then have fallen out a little bit and fallen back into it. You can become quite addictive to mental health, because there's no topic that I can think of that we could discuss that doesn't have a mental health implication. You can think of anything. I've got a student who's actually doing some fact sheets for me, and she said, "Oh, what should I get some fact sheets on?" And I said, any topic that you want, we can make an argument that's related to mental health. So it's one of those things that we all have something to do with pretty much in every aspect of our work. Now, WayAhead, you might wonder why being and the other one is mental health carers and collective purposes there. We're very fortunate to have an office in the city, and we share it with two other organisations. One is Being, which is the old New South Wales Consumer Advisory Group, which is actually the peak consumer group in New South Wales. And the other one is Mental Health Carers New South Wales, which is the peak carers group. And so between the three of us, we formed a little group called Collective Purpose. And it's a lovely synergy of expertise and knowledge that we can work together. We can work together from the point of view of WayAhead, which is a mental health promotion prevention organisation, but also get the input from both consumers and carers. One thing, since I've been working in mental health, I really think things are getting better. I've seen a lot improve since the early 90s when I first started working in mental health. Stigma, I still see as one of the biggest issues that we need to overcome. We have come a long way, and the more that people talk about are happy to talk in public about their mental health issues, I think the better we are as a community. But I also think it starts to break down stigma. I'm told now by a lot of consumers that I shouldn't be using the word stigma, I should actually be using the word discrimination, because it's a form of discrimination when you stigmatise somebody with a title or a brand or a disability to some extent. I was just really proud. Just something I think that Trevor mentioned, or the Mayor mentioned, the issue to do with. I've just lost my thought there because I don't have it written down. It'll come back to me in a second. It was something the Mayor said about stigma that I'll need to talk to you, and I will come back with that one. Oh, I know what it was about. Sorry, it was suicide. About suicide. When Mental Health Association started moving from mental illness education into mental health promotion, we started to talk about suicide, about mental illness across the board, and saying, look, it can happen to anyone. It doesn't discriminate to any one particular group, or is no one's more likely to get it than any other group. It's across the board. And this was to help us to get the message across that it can happen to you. However, about 2 years ago, it was pointed out to me that that's being really unfair to the groups where it's more prevalent. In other words, whether minority groups, whether it's rural people, whether it's LGBTQI, whether it's CALD, whether it's migrants, these people are more likely to suffer Aboriginal people than the general population. And we were doing a disservice by saying it could happen to everybody, to anyone. And so I've sort of changed my focus a little bit and saying we need to recognise that there are groups that are more susceptible to this, and we need to be targeting and looking at those much more than we have perhaps in the past. A couple of weeks ago, I went to a conference in Melbourne, and it was Communities in Control. And it was a conference about empowering communities to be compassionate. And it was one of those lovely conferences where you sit and you listen to these most amazing things that people are doing. And they just make you exhilarated by there are so many wonderful examples of people, compassion being shown in communities, and communities getting together when they need to do something. And they gave a couple of great examples, and I just wanted to share, well, they gave a lot of examples, but two of the examples that sort of stuck with me was one that was operating that's currently operating in Britain, and it's called the From Project. I'm not sure if you've heard of that one, but it was a GP who was concerned about people coming into her surgery with mental health issues and feeling very isolated and alone. So she started up a program where just getting people to connect with each other in their community. And this has been going now for a couple of years, and it's been evaluated and as an academic research program, and it has had amazing results. I think it's something like 17% less admissions to emergency wards than anyone else. In the other local areas where it doesn't operate, it's got up something like 25%, but in this one community it's gone down because people are connecting with each other. And not only their mental health is better, but their physical health is better as well. The other one that stuck in my mind was a vet from New Zealand. We seem as though we're being so many New Zealanders coming over here with such great ideas. I don't know if certainly in Sydney there are lots of New Zealanders coming over showing us about some of the wonderful examples they're doing there. But this was a vet from New Zealand who came over and was in Melbourne, and she lost her cat. Her cat went missing, and so she was quite distressed, and she got all these brochures, and she circulated the brochures locally. She put them in letterboxes and under people's doors. And then suddenly she had all these people phoning her and saying, have you found your cat? I'm really sorry you've lost your cat, blah, blah, blah. She found a cat. Someone came back with a cat. But as a result, people started to connect. Now, this is inner city Melbourne. People started connecting together and starting chatting and talking about what things that they had in common and how they could share and how they could be compassionate with each other and really give the opportunity to give back to the community. Just some wonderful examples that are going on, and these are things that we don't often hear. We hear the negative, but we don't actually hear the positive. Over there since the early 90s, I've seen a change. I've got to go. I've seen a change. The community development is coming back. The passionate community is coming back. It became unfashionable, I think, in sort of the late 90s, early 2000s. It's now coming back, and we're seeing a change in people wanting to be part of the community, wanting to be compassionate and wanting to give. Nothing better than being able to give to somebody, not only make them feel better, but for you to feel better as well. So I just think it's wonderful that you're here. It's a great example of a society, a community that's compassionate and cares about the rest of us, and the more of it, the better we'll be. So thank you.
So I'm now delighted to, thank you very much, Liz, now delighted to invite Professor David Perkins, my boss, to just speak to us for a few minutes.
Thanks very much, Trevor. You'll be aware that the Centre for Rural and Remote Mental Health has 3 activities. We're interested in how can I be mentally healthy, me, my family, my school, my church, whatever. Secondly, how can we support and assist mental illness services? And thirdly, how can we address rural suicide? And everything we do is aimed at rural communities and remote communities. The statistics are that if you take capital cities as a whole, people are half as likely again to die by suicide in rural and remote areas. If you take the best results in Sydney and Melbourne, it's almost twice as high in rural and remote as it is in Sydney and Melbourne. And the rural and remote figures are not going down. The Sydney and Melbourne figures are. So we have a flatlining situation, and the big capital cities are beginning to see improvements. We think there are 3 sorts of things we're trying to achieve by encouraging you to come together. Firstly, we would like to change policy. We want to put rural suicide prevention on the map. We want it to be a policy issue. We want Phil and Andrew and people to be saying, and Reg, we cannot not address this issue. Secondly, we want to do that by creating partnerships right across the community. We don't believe this is a problem for Jason Crisp and the state mental health services and your GP alone. We believe it is something we need to address together. And thirdly, we want to identify practical actions. What can we do? We think there are a series of important values. We think we should be aspirational. We should want it to be better than it is at the moment. Secondly, we think that we should look at it at the level of the population, the town, the city, the state, not simply try to identify people who are in a bad place and leave it at that. Thirdly, we think that we need leadership within government in particular. And I've told the government people I'm gunning for them, and we'll be having coffee and conversations because this is a serious community issue. Fourthly, we think that people with experience of suicide, of self-harm, of losing someone should be a key part of the conversation. It's not about doing things for people. It's about encouraging people and working with people. And then we believe that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders have experienced the worst of what is happening and that they should be a key priority. So what of the practical actions? We think there are immediate practical actions and there are things we need to build that will have an impact in future years. A farmer said to me, we understand planning for the future. If you want shade in your paddock, you plant trees. You know, you don't plant fully mature trees. You actually plant trees, you water them with the intention of building something. But we've identified as a centre 5 areas where we think action is needed. 2 areas where we believe all the focus is taking place at the moment, and 3 areas where we want to build. And the talks that are coming after me are about 2 of those 3 areas. So the things that we're doing at the moment is we're trying to identify people who are in a very bad place, trying to help them, to encourage them, and to enable them to choose a better path. Secondly, at the moment, we're trying to help those individuals, families, communities, schools, workplaces who have lost someone to suicide and who are in pain. Recent research says 150 people are impacted when one person dies by suicide. And imagine if one person dies by suicide in the school, the whole school is devastated. So those are key priorities, and those are where the focus tends to be at the moment. But we believe there are 3 other areas we need to focus on. The third, and you'll find this in this leaflet that is in your, and you can also have the full booklet if you're interested, which is on the back table and looks a bit like this. The third area we need to focus on is planning for our community. And every community is different. Your community may have a lot of refugees. It may have a lot of unemployed people. It may be in a situation where its key industries are actually dying. It may be in a situation where there are a lot of people from an ethnic group or from a lesbian gay group or whatever. So local plans need to be local plans with local commitments and resources. The fourth area we think is children and young people. What we know is that a lot of problems arise by the time people have got through their teenage years. We really need to focus on age-specific support, learning, education, understanding, peer support in those years. It's great that we're going to have a presentation on what's going on in this school in a few minutes. And the last one is we need to look at those communities where the future is going to be different to the past. I can think of one community we're working with where there is, the land is scarred by open-cut mining, by the results of electricity generation, and other sorts of industries which will be different in the future. These industries are not going to be the same. We're seeing countries now that have carbon-free days. For goodness sake, you know, the future is going to be different. People are going to need new jobs, new education, new support. And in those areas in particular, we're working with councils looking at economic diversification, social diversification, and building support. So those are the areas that we think from our research are areas we should be focusing on. We've climbed out of our ivory tower. We are, as it were, putting it out there, and we're looking, as I say, to develop partnerships, and we're developing partnerships with schools, with communities, with councils. We're looking to influence policy so that resources are put in the right place, and we're also looking for practical actions. We want to do things that will make a difference, and because we work for a university, we will use the research skills and other skills we have to see if they make a difference. So thank you very much for coming. I'm getting the shut up sign. Let's move and find out what's happening in other areas. But thank you very much for coming, and please get back to us if we can be of help.
Thank you very much, David. It's not every day you get to do that to your boss. But, now, I'd like to welcome to speak to you now Rachel French and Sharon Cope from this school. They're going to talk to us about the positive environment that they're trying to create here and the learning that they're emphasising in this school. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, good evening everyone. My name's Rachel French and this is Sharon Cope. We're both teachers at Orange Public School. I actually teach down at the infants department and Sharon's up here at the primary department. We're here tonight just to talk to you about what OPS has been doing with a program called Kids Matter, which has been something that Sharon and I are quite passionate about. We've been on the journey for about 3 years now and have been involved right from the word go. For those of you that haven't heard about Kids Matter before, it's a flexible whole school approach to children's mental health and wellbeing for primary schools. It acts as an umbrella under which our school's existing programs already fit underneath, and it builds on the work that we're already doing with children's mental health and wellbeing. So basically what Kids Matter does, it provides us with the proven methods, tools and support. It's a fantastic resource that we're able to get many resources from through their website. We're able to put things into our newsletters and lots of resources and things. So basically, Kids Matter, it's a 3-year process that we've had to undertake. So we just thought we'd go through each of the components a little bit, tell you what we've been doing, some of the great things that have been happening at OPS. So basically the last 3 years, Sharon and I have trained across all 4 components. So we're sort of going to go through each component and tell you what each of them are. So research has identified these are the areas where schools can make a real difference in supporting their students' mental health and wellbeing, and each of the components is interrelated in supporting their mental health and wellbeing. So component 1 is a positive school community. Component 2 is social and emotional learning for students, and component 3 is working with parents and carers, and component 4, which we've just actually finished in the last month or so in training all of our staff, is actually helping children with mental health difficulties, which was a real eye-opener and probably a component that Sharon and I got the most out of doing our training. So I'll just hand you over to Sharon, who's going to talk about component 1.
Rachel. Component 1 was all about making a positive community, school community, and having every face has a place, every voice is valued, and everyone has something to contribute. During the past 3 years, we've had a really strong action team who meet regularly twice a term, coming up with a variety of strategies to improve our school community. We have parent representatives and health professionals within our community who attend our meetings and contribute ideas and strategies for us to use. Our first aim in this section was to make our playground a really positive place to be in and play in, and we decided to make improvements to the general environment. We painted bright and colourful games on our cement and walls, just to brighten up the playground and just to provide activities for students to work together on and to use. We created 3 bright and colourful buddy benches in the playgrounds for our children to use, for those children who particularly had problems making friendships and things like that. We used these buddy benches as a spot that they could go to, and explicitly trained our children. You know, if you see a child on that bench, you know, maybe you might like to go over and, you know, ask if they'd like to play and join in. So that's been a fantastic experience, particularly down the infants' playground, where, you know, those smaller children sometimes, you know, are not sure about how to go about making these friendships. We also surveyed our whole school community just to find out how many different cultures we had. And yeah, we were actually amazed at the number of different cultures within our own school. And we decided to make welcome signs for our officers so that when people came in, we had a variety of different languages displayed. We like to display a variety of different cultural artwork throughout our school, and have cultural music also playing. We have a strong Wiradjuri community at our school, which is really important, and we have a really wonderful Indigenous garden that has been set up, which includes, you know, nature tracks, native plants, a path, areas where children can sit and have circle time down there, and it's a lovely spot just to visit and play in. We've also celebrate, you know, NAIDOC Week, and we have lots and lots of activities where the community can come in to us and visit us in the school. Assemblies where parents are always invited. At the beginning of the year, we also hold parent information sessions, making sure that the parents know that we are a Kids Matter school, and that is one of our big focuses. Last year we had a school fete, and there we had a Kids Matter stand to celebrate and promote, you know, all the important things that we do in our school community. Okay, I'll pass you back to Rachel.
So when we started component 2, which was social and emotional learning for students, this component basically looks... That's okay, no that's all right. That's okay. Well, probably I think this would be the most important thing that we've taken on board, and that's our Fun Friends and Friends for Life program. So it's fantastic. So we're happy to answer any questions about that later on as far as what that looks like within our school, because it's probably been one of the most positive things that has come out of our Kids Matter journey would be that social emotional program. So yeah, so we're happy to answer any questions about that. No worries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm so sorry to cut that off, but it is a very tight timetable. Just the connection between what you've just heard and suicide prevention. The research is in kids who learn these skills in primary school will have a greater chance of finishing high school, have a greater chance of going on to further education, are less likely to take up unhealthy drinking, and are more likely to succeed in relationships in later life. Hence, it's a really critical, fundamental place in our suicide prevention strategy. I'd now like to invite Di Gill to address us for a few minutes. Many of you know Di already. She comes from Canowindra, and she has provided enormous support to people with mental illness in this community for a long time. Welcome, Di.
Good evening, welcome for being here. Trevor acknowledged quite a few people, and the one group of people I'd like to add to his acknowledgement are the carers. Those people have walked the journey beside someone who has had suicidal thoughts, or perhaps have lost someone to suicide. Their grief is massive. And the reason I do that, and I don't normally tear up, because I'm one. I've had 2 people in my family one attempt to take his life, 2 have had severe suicidal thoughts, and there's not a week goes past or a day that goes past without me checking them. So it doesn't stop. It's a continual journey for me to travel. 12 years ago, I was out at Condo talking to farmers, the same situation that we've got now, and the same message is going, we need to look after each other. This is not one person's problem, it's not one department's problem, it's a whole problem. We all need to work together. We look at road accidents, and the police department doesn't stop road accidents. What stops road accidents is slowing down, putting on our seat belts, and everybody taking part of that. When we look at mental health and suicide, we need everybody to slow down, listen to what's being said, observe what's going on, and to take part of that. And like the police department steps in and picks up when there has been an accident, that's when organisations like the Health Department, Lifeline, all those other organisations will step in and help. But we all need to take on board what's going on around us. As the teachers have told us, it takes a village to raise a child, but it takes a whole country to keep us safe. So I know I've only got 5 minutes, and I'm keeping an eye on that. So I do acknowledge the wealth of knowledge that's here today. I do encourage you to listen to what your family, your friends, your neighbours, those around you. And if you happen to be, what's said in here is called a gatekeeper, and I have a bit of an issue with that title. I'd like to call it the door openers. If you're a door opener, or you know someone who's a good door opener, get the skills and knowledge to identify what's going on. And then we're not asking you to be professionals, we're asking you to tap the person on the shoulder when early signs are showing. Don't wait till there's 8, 10, 12 signs, and by that time their thoughts are so fixed. 3, 4 signs. They're not sleeping, they're not eating, they're talking low mood, they're increasing their substance use. If you notice 3 or 4 signs with someone, that's when you start talking to them and saying, I'm concerned, and what can we do together to improve your well-being so that you don't go further down. The same as if you saw someone limping or with a cut on their leg, you'd say, let's do something about that before it turns into a very severe infection or an illness. We do that with people's mental health. So I'm encouraging you to be a door opener. or get to know where the door openers are so that they can help the people and decrease the amount of mental illness and then, unfortunately, the risk of suicide. And I did in less than 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Di. In many ways, you are a champion. Now we're going to move into our panel. We've used up a bit of the panel's time already. Perhaps I know that Phil Donato needs to leave soon. Would you like a very brief comment?
Thanks very much, Trevor. I won't keep you long, and sorry to interrupt the proceedings. I know there's about to go into a panel. I've got to go to another engagement very shortly. So just touching on what Mayor Reg Kidd said earlier, this is about communication and the journey and discussing these issues. Before I was elected into Parliament 18 odd months ago, I was a police officer for 22 years, and I saw many of my colleagues who suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, and some have committed suicide. And I know how David said, every person who commits suicide has an impact on 150 people that they're connected with or their community. And I can certainly tell you that when something like that happens in the police force, it affects many thousands of people. But this is something I feel very, very passionate about, obviously because of my previous background, but also, travelling through the electorate. We know we're going through a very dry conditions at the moment, drought conditions at the moment, and many of the farmers that I speak to in our regional communities are really doing it tough. And I was only talking to Alex Ferguson of Lifeline today, actually, and he was saying like just a bit of rain over the weekend has certainly helped the mood of a lot of farmers, but there's certainly a deep sentiment out there amongst some of our farmers who are really struggling. And I know firsthand a friend of mine whose father committed suicide. He was a farmer down near Goulburn because of prolonged drought and an ongoing undiagnosed depressive illness. So it's something which I'm really, really focused on, and everyone I see in my electorate who I deal with is part of going around and speaking to farmers and whatnot. That's all paramount in my mind, and I've raised the issue. I've spoken about it in Parliament before in relation to mental health, especially in rural communities, because we know that suicide in regional and rural communities is higher than that in the Sydney metropolitan or the larger cities, and we need to work on that. It's great to see. I won't keep you too much longer. It was great to see the work being done by APS in terms of, I suppose, helping to instil that resilience in those children and build those children up. And I think that's all part and parcel of it. As the previous speaker said, it takes a village to raise a child, and certainly by encouraging healthy exercise, eating habits, looking out for one another. If there's somebody who's isolated, include them into your group exercises or playing or talking. All those skills that you learn at such a young age, which will come into build on those blocks later in life, which are very important. So congratulations. Finally, to Professor David Perkins and your team, congratulations. I know you do some fantastic work. I won't keep you too much longer. Thank you for having me here tonight, and it's great that we can have these things, these types of nights, and get the conversation going. And thank you.
Very much, Phil. Okay, I'd like to hand over the microphone to David Perkins and invite Liz and Jason. Jason, as you were, Jason, to join me on the panel. And if any of you have written down questions, one of the staff is going to pick those up from you.
Thanks very much, Trevor. I do observe that I was in London last week, and they've chosen a policeman to lead the Thrive Manchester suicide prevention wellbeing programme because of the energy about getting things happening, and also because of the experience of dealing with people at difficult points in their lives. What I'd like to do is to firstly see if there are any questions on the floor, and perhaps take a couple of questions, and then please say who you are. You don't have to, but it would be good. And say what your question is. We'll take a couple of questions and then give them to our panel to answer. And we'll also look at the ones that people have written down. Any questions there? All the questions answered.
If you don't ask any questions, Di, I'll get back up.
Just a comment of something that Di said. Somebody said to me, an example of compassion is listening and not waiting to be heard. And that sort of sticks in my mind about how important it is to listen, rather than just sitting waiting for your opportunity to speak. And I think a lot of us fall into that thing of waiting to speak rather than actually listening to somebody that's telling you something.
Please, Tessa.
Oh, no, it's okay. You can hear me back there, can't you? Right. So, Sylvia's of DePaul at the moment have just trained right through from their executive to their volunteers, so that it doesn't matter who walks in the door, if they know that there's a problem developing, they can refer them on to the next level. So volunteers have got the basic listening signs, and then when that person goes and speaks to someone in what they call conference, which is the people are given the hand up, then the conference person is aware, and then instead of just saying, here's the funds so you can pay your power bill, they can then go, but what else can we help you with? We've noticed. Do you need some information about seeking an appointment with your doctor? Do you need to know what other services are there? But not only within their organisation, they cross across through the different levels, but also outside their organisation, because most of these deployed volunteers are connected somewhere else, whether it's in the library, an art group or something like that. So they take it outside that as well, and their family and friends.
Any other questions, or I'll ask them, please.
What's your advice on how to be there for somebody but without them draining you in a way?
I think the first thing is you've got to acknowledge it's not you. That this is not about you again, this is actually about where they are in their life. And it's okay to step back every now and then. But don't bear it all yourself. This is a friend, we're not talking a client here. So what other friends and family can you bring in to her network? She needs to know that there's a network that supports her.
Yeah.
Sit down and say, who else would you like to be part of this, and plan it. If you don't show up, who can I contact to check on you? Or who else would you like to come in? But it's not you, it's where she is in her life at this time.
Yeah, I never withdraw as in the sense I always keep making plans and keep texting to make sure, but yeah, so just involving more people to make a network.
They need a network.
Okay.
Please.
Just want to make a comment around working with youth health. So my name's Shane from NSS Grade School. We've built a really strong relationship with CAMS in particular, and also Headspace. I think we really work hard to case manage students, really get into that deep thinking of how we can support that wraparound multidisciplinary sort of approach to supporting the student as well as their family and friends. And I think it's just really important to try and I guess touch on a character, building character basically. So explicitly teaching kids how to show gratitude, how to be kind, and have hope and things like that. So we actually explicitly teach that at our school. And we also embrace it with our staff as well with a range of activities. But I think through the schools, I think really do need to get that communication around health. We've got some fantastic resources and knowledge in our town, and I think we need to really work together to use those.
It sometimes seems to me that we've been talking about physical first aid since Florence Nightingale and the Crimean War, but it's only recently that we're actually having open conversations about what is happening for someone who may be thinking of harming themselves. And we need to understand more about that. I think it's great we're teaching the kids about how to look after each other. I'm reminded of the Good Samaritan, but I might get told off by the guy in the corner. Now, Paul, then one at the back. So, can you use your big voice, Paul?
Sorry, yeah. The suicide is going up in rural areas, but it's actually going down in the cities.
Okay, so one question is why might suicide be going up in rural areas and going down in the cities? And there's a question at the back.
Yeah, hi, my name is Rachel. I'm Sharon Cope, New South Wales Farmers. I just came to a drought with New South Wales drought coordinator. My question to the panel is how can we think a bit more about being nimble to the needs of regional New South Wales that is suffering drought? I came from a meeting in Taranara and each member that stood up carried such an emotional burden of the situation they're currently in. How can we be more responsive to that where resources are quite considerably stretched, you as organisations and as individuals?
Okay, so two questions. Why is regional rates going up and city rates going down? And how can we be more responsive to regional communities where the resources are very stretched and where the environmental and other challenges are very direct? Trevor, why don't I ask you about the rates?
Thanks, Paul, for your question. Let me just start by saying suicide is still somewhat of a mystery. So nobody can answer that question with any degree of certainty. However, and informed by the research that's been done and our understanding of rural communities, I think we understand that there is two things working together. One is that there's more fragility to the social support network that people can rely on in rural areas. Sometimes it's because just simply distance, people aren't nearby and can help us immediately. And sometimes it's due to when things go bad, rural people may be more inclined to blame themselves than to blame others and to internalise that and to feel bad about themselves. The other side of the coin is that we have fewer resources to respond to people who are suicidal. A simple example of this, if I'm suffering from depression and anxiety and I want to find somebody to help me with that, it is enormously easier to do that in a large urban area. There's no stigma in driving 2 suburbs away and going to visit a clinical psychologist. And also, you're much more likely to be able to get an appointment within the time that you're feeling bad. So access to services, I've got the microphone back. Access to services is to the types of services that can respond quickly and adequately when people are in trouble. That's right.
Di, would you like to comment on the issue of farmers and limited resources and environmental challenge?
I think, Nicole, particularly, and we see this with our Aboriginal community as well, is that disconnect into land. We talk about having good relationships and having family friends and that, but farmers have a relationship with their land. And when the land farms their value. Just recently, a man actually adopted out his cows, and the response to that was magic. And the response you could see in his face when someone said, "I'll adopt a cow," and someone else adopted another one. So we need to reinforce how important our farmer community are, and not only those that are on property, but those that work around them, those that cart cattle, those that bring in fodder, those that keep the equipment going. They're so valuable, and I can often say to people, I've been doing this for 12 years and it's purely a selfish reason, and that's because I like to eat and I like to wear clothes. And we need to remind our farmers that without them we'd be very forward-making people. And it needs to be done at a national level, it needs to be done from our cities. And I don't really make much little care packages and send them down. I mean, actually go out to the farm and say, you know, you do it tough. If I had a shoe shop, I'd walk out the door at 6 o'clock at night and I don't have to look at the shoes. But a farmer is on property 24 hours a day. They're hearing their cows bellow because there's not enough water. They're hearing the sheep, they're up laying. It's not, it is a lifestyle, but it's really hard, and we need to let our farming community know that they are valued. They are probably of more value than those people working in Pitt Street. So we need to keep reminding them just how important they are to us so that we can survive.
I guess I'm hearing two words this evening. One is journey and one is relationship. And, you know, it's all very well to hold a fine meeting or to write a fine document, but we're actually interested in how we can journey with people and with communities, and how we can work and build relationships with people who are connected. You know, very often the people who are trying to make a difference have no connections. And one of the great things about the people who've come this evening is that you are connected with a whole variety of different communities. I see Andrew has just arrived, who's connected with another very interesting community. Welcome. Please.
Can I just make a comment on the last issue? And I certainly need to know that our farmers are valued. But there are a couple of things. I don't believe this needs to be a national suicide prevention plan. Rural communities and farmers are very local. Trust is a huge thing. There is the issue, whether you want to talk about it or not, of locals and dwellings, so that they really need to know the person they're talking to. And I think local plans should be done, and not split hand down plan from national or regional or New South Wales LH2. It needs to be a local plan. And certain farmers, I think if you had rural financial councils to go out to farm anyway, trained as those door openers that can also cite mental stage. And may I remind you, you don't need to be mentally ill in order to suicide. And certainly what is not listed in any of the literature is the issue of hope and the issue of men that actually have a value or a standard that they want for their families. Okay? And sometimes they believe they don't meet those standards, and it does bring them down. So, you know, rural financial counsellors that can be trusted can go into their home and can give them some sort of plan, some sort of link with the community. And it's also known that people who attempt or are depressed don't always see or talk to the GPs, don't always talk to local mental health professionals. So it's an issue that there needs to be people within the community that are trusted and will talk to these people and will take those people's services. Now, I don't think a national plan at this stage has any value. And while the health department doesn't, at some stages, don't overreach to get into the community enough, but that needs to be done by locals that are trusted. So it's more a local people.
I think you're saying some things that we agree very strongly with. Firstly, that solutions are local, Solutions are not designed in Canberra, they're not designed in Sydney. Solutions need to be local, that we need to work with the networks that are there rather than networks we would like to be there.
But it's not only networks, these people aren't talking to mates, to family members, to anyone. So it actually needs someone that is highly trusted and can take that, listen as you said, and then take them to services. Now my main concern is a person that is depressed, suicidal, and gets to 2 o'clock in the morning needs to be responded to fairly quickly. Nobody at this stage, local, state, regional, does anything. And until you can solve that problem at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're still going to have increased suicide. Now, while the social determinants of local councils like Lithgow and Griffiths are very low, and there's long-term issues with unemployment and things like that, there are long-term plans that need to be solved. But if you don't solve at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're still going to have suicide.
Can I just make a comment there too about, I guess, responding at 2 o'clock in the morning? And my experience, and even a personal experience, is that the person closest to the person who's unwell is often the hardest person, or the most, it's that person has the most difficult time in trying to reach a solution or find a solution. The carer or the person who is emotionally tied can often be the last person that the person in need wants to hear from, or and that really complicates it, and it complicates the relationship, and often that stops people from getting help because of the complexity of an emotional relationship between the person that you're really close to. That's hard.
And that's granted by the same type of people who think about suicide, also talk shame, also want to talk about the state that they're in. And that doesn't include people, for instance, that have already made a decision to suicide. So if they're happy with their decision, they may be completely depressed on one day and they're happy the next. To me, that's complete alarm. They've already made the decision to suicide. But if you don't get those people at the local level listening to that and knowing the symptoms and doing something about it, then this will continue. So while I agree, family members, firmly, I have personal experience with this, but the guilt over me is that we're not there, we can't be there 24/7, etc., etc. There's still people still want to talk to you.
There's something that's happening recently at a national level. It's starting off very small, but I'm hoping that it's going to go far and wide, is a coalition to end loneliness. It's actually started off in England, and there is now a minister to end loneliness in Britain. And they're trying to start the same thing here, as a recognition that loneliness can be a key starting point for people to develop serious mental health problems. And people don't ask, are you lonely? You can even be, you can have lots of people around you, but you can still be lonely. And there's this push to actually get people to say and to identify loneliness as being a risk factor. And I think the more of us that pick up the issue to do a simple thing, it's such a simple thing. If we can pick up the issue of loneliness, we would go a long way to be able to help a lot of people at a much earlier stage.
I guess I would comment too that we as a centre are very keen to work with communities to encourage people to have just the very basic skills to be able to work with and communicate and walk with people who are in a bad place. And sometimes that's just about acting outside my comfort zone. I have a friend who has attempted to harm himself, and the only thing I could do was go for a walk with him. And there was a joke that was made last week at a meeting I was at saying, getting men together for groups are a little bit different because they support each other but they don't talk to each other. So, another question.
My comment was, I manage Lifeline, and I guess in my experience, I agree with what you're saying about that trust factor, and I know about financial counsellors and, even myself going out to some properties in recent times that people who have made an attempt in their life. I think on one level there is a trust factor if you are from that community and that we do hold that confidentiality in very high esteem. But then I also volunteer on phones at Lifeline as well, and that's often a comment that it's made is that perceived burden that people have when they're suicidal to a loved one and people that care for them. So that's why they lack this lifeline where that anonymity is so important. So I see both sides of it, I guess, and I guess it's got me thinking I think it's important to have a two-pronged approach, and so that there are options. I think options are really important. I know in whatever I do, I always offer that, yes, there are sometimes it's hard to get that appointment local, especially when people are on the land. They're working, 7 days a week. They're not in hours that's in work. There are such obstacles in that, and again, that's where I want to come in for this 2 o'clock in the morning phone calls. But I see that it needs that, I agree, John, with what you say, that connection to the land and that going out there and offering the practical advice, the help with the financial counsellors that are also trained in suicide interventions. I think so often it is the loved ones and family members are the ones that are possibly needed, but they're pushed away because of the burden that they feel. The person who's at risk of suicide is looking on to those loved ones. They're trying to protect them, and it's such an isolating, I think, path that the people on the land have. It's often a solo way the world is job as a provider, caretaker of the land to stop and they're not getting the break. That's the other thing, is that the 9 to 5 people get their self-care, they get their time doing hobbies, interests, connecting with families, which a lot of our rural farmers aren't getting.
I fully understand what you're saying, truth be known, I was a collector for 14 years, farm debt, before I was a social worker, so I'm well aware of all those issues. I've known suicide from issues. Social worker, I spoke to Alex Ferguson 2 weeks ago, and this is also the issue of the fact 2 o'clock in the morning certainly would make referrals to the AAA service, but then I think there's a systems failure where mental health workers are not going out with police to those issues to make a proper assessment. And also, some of those people aren't really ill. If they're sent to hospital and discharged, they still remain depressed. So there's systems failure of no connection in the community to guide that person through the GP care plans, followed by psychologists, etc. So, a couple of systems failure that we could do on a local level to get. And I think the police, I went to a conference for accredited persons the other day, but police suggest now for the last couple of years trying to train staff to be police forces. I've done one area so far. That needs to be a lot larger scale.
I think it's in Victoria that happens in Victoria, that there is a mental health professional that goes out with the police. There is something.
If I could just draw that back to the idea of local planning and local. If the system isn't working, then we can't just send a message back through our local members or through the Director of Mental Health and say, hey, the system's not working, because their capacity to fix the system is quite limited. So the challenge, and I don't know, this is the challenge, I don't know how we respond to it. How can a community organise to itself to make the flaws in the system, or to remediate the flaws in the system? What can we do to make it less inadequate for people? And if we can get together and think about that at the local level, we may go a long way towards better responses.
One there. Can you use your best voice?
Exactly what you
about a group. One of the services we hospice is for a service for women who've just left domestic violence and are now in emergency or short-term accommodation. And it was put to us by Family Community Services that we could each have a little bucket of money to provide additional support to these women. But as a group of providers, we agreed to pool the money and provide an after-hours proactive support service to proactively contact women who just leave domestic violence. And they're probably feeling quite lonely, isolated, possibly don't want to return back to the violence, back to the relationship. And it's having some quite extraordinary and surprising results, more so than what we expected, in the sense of reducing the rate of returning back to the relationship, stabilising housing, and reducing reoffending by the perpetrator. But what I'm really responding to is that it was a group of providers who would normally be competitive with one another and all grab whatever money they can.
Yep.
Isn't that a strange idea that when we work together things might be better? Isn't it a strange idea that when we work together things might be better? Yeah. I'm going to take one more question, then I'd like just to pose a question to you folks, please, over there.
Not so much as a question, it's
a comment.
Hopefully an answer.
Yes.
I am studying peer support. Certificate for it, taken by travel from here to Wollongong every week just to do it. And I really believe that peer support is actually the way forward. The Mental Health Commission has recognised it, and I do. If we can get any one of those farmers who's actually gone through that himself or herself, and actually get them supporting them, and it's about not fixing them, it's about empowering them to fix themselves and to pay it forward, and actually, in the short term, to actually answer immediately, we need peer support workers who are already being trained, who are already around to actually go out to those areas. And that's why I really want to know is why isn't community services here in Tayford at Orange or Backers doing the peer support course so that we can actually train them?
Yeah, I think peer support workers are absolutely critical. Absolutely. I'd like to ask one question of the group here, and that is, are there any further conversations we should have that would be helpful, either with particular groups or with particular interests? And the second is, can you think of any practical actions we should be taking? The reason we wrote the paper and the reason we together have sponsored this session is not that we want to big note ourselves, it's that we want to try and work out how in Orange and this area we might be able to move forward in a more collaborative, more effective manner. And I guess in the comment about the system, I think we are the system. You know, the system is not Jason, it's not the general practitioners, it's not the peer workers. We are the system, and we're either active parts of the system or we're parts of the system that are not entirely sure what our role is or how we should contribute. So perhaps just a final question to you. Are there further conversations we should have? Do you have any idea of what they might be? Or should the centre and the interests here simply be going and agitating? Please.
Well, one thing I would suggest that we should be talking about is that Bluefield is acute.
Yep.
Inpatient. I've actually become aware that there is something about subacute. There was one down in the world where I'm studying, and people who are just needing help with their medication, just feeling that they're getting lost in their, with whatever's going on.
The acute service can't sort everything, and we need to respond to people's needs. Yeah, sure. There's an arm at the back in a green jacket.
Stigma that goes with mental health or attempted suicide or suicide, and the discrimination comes from that. And it's a two-sided thing to say about discrimination. Yes, you are discriminated in numerous ways that by actually speaking out or trying to get help through any of the organisations, I won't name any clients about any organisation, whether it be a volunteer organisation or even your own employer, whether private or government, or in my case, the fact that you stand up and say, listen, I'm doing this tough here, I'm not doing really well at on life's edge, automatically you are just will sweep the roof or you're on the problem, and just employment opportunities that are with pride or if the police are called and then they schedule you, because that's their system, to send you to a medical institution or a hospital, you're then scheduled, you then got this black mark against you, where you might as well be a criminal almost, because of taking the legal faith, yes, in some people, I can vouch first-hand personally, people who have stated to me they will not go that path because they've seen the effects of it on me and the way in which I have been discriminated against for the last 10 years. Because I stood up, I went in and got help, I went to two institutions, spent 5 weeks in one of my own costs, which cost me over $25,000. I wouldn't pay it, but I don't think it helped me. But I was trying to be, like you say, being empowered to help myself. It's no believing these words not going to help myself. I think that's a really big part that people need to understand, the stigma of standing up and having a practice. I'm not doing this well. This goes right across the farming community, as the gentleman said here, they're very insular and you really want to go to farm. All the time saying the public got to socialise in rural areas.
Well, I guess the comment I'd have is that, we've tried to address stigma against women and discrimination against women. We've tried to address discrimination against people who are disabled. We've tried to address discrimination against people from different ethnic groups, against Aboriginal people. We've not been successful wholly in any of those areas. And we have to address discrimination against people who have mental illnesses and who are in some sense different to us. And, I think I'm going to wind this up and go informal, if you like. Happy to have some conversations.
Can I
Okay.
really just one quick, really quick response just to that one. Discrimination stigma is ignorance. And we need to actually make our society less ignorant. But the other, just a quick thing, when I first started working in mental health in 1993, my boss said to me, we know we've made a good advance in mental health when we automatically send flowers to somebody that goes to hospital with a mental health problem. We send flowers to people with a physical health problem, we don't send them to people with a mental health problem. And until we do that automatically, we've still got a long way to go.
Can we please address people such as us? We don't have a mental illness. We live with
a mental health problem. Yeah.
Not just based on
Okay.
There's one suggestion from a body as of a year here, and what I'm hearing is this stuff's fantastic, it's awesome, but then what I hear from this gentleman is a real local voice, and I'm wondering if there's any community forums that could be run, even for the organisations to get together, or do you already do that?
I think the answer is there are a lot of different groups that are running. And I think one question we might address is would people be interested in a community forum for providers, for people who are users of services, for people who are community members, and to hold a discussion in somewhat greater length to see about how the system might be addressed. And by the system, I really mean each of us.
I think it's really important to give as much voice as we can.
Yeah.
Because without that,
Yeah, sure. Okay, look, thank you very much. I'm going to close it there and say there are 1 or 2 refreshments at the back. Please go and speak to your federal member who's at the back. Thank you very much for coming, and we will hold a discussion about the possibility of a community forum where we can hold a conversation in somewhat greater length. And thank you very much to the WayAhead and to our teachers from Orange Public School and to Di Gill. And thank you very much for coming.
Just before you get up off your chairs, I just would like to acknowledge this is a meeting about some pretty heavy stuff, and if you've come along looking for answers and you haven't got them tonight, or if you've come along and the conversations concerned you, then we're concerned that you reach out for help. We're very lucky in Western New South Wales to have one of the best 24-hour mental health services, and the phone number for them is 1-800-011 or 511. And then there's the ever-present Lifeline, who do an excellent job, 131144. Please look after yourselves, travel safely tonight, and I guarantee we have excellent refreshments. And so one last thing you could do is eat up and have a cup of tea.